A narrow boat moves through Xochimilco, and the city begins to disappear. The canal tightens between reeds, cultivated plots, and ahujote trees. Then the first face appears above the water, a doll with one clouded eye, its plastic split by years of rain. A few meters farther on, there are dozens more. They hang from trunks, roofs, ropes, and fences. Some are intact. Others survive only as heads, torsos, or faded fragments. This is the island of the dolls, a real agricultural chinampa transformed by one man's repeated ritual into Mexico's most unsettling folk landmark. The familiar version begins with a drowned girl and a doll found floating in the canal. But that story has no confirmed victim, no secure date, and no surviving record that proves the event happened as later accounts describe it. The island's real mystery is therefore not whether the dolls move at night. It is how Julián Santana Barrera came to believe that these damaged objects belonged here, and how his private belief reshaped an entire place. To understand what he changed, the landscape must come first. Xochimilco is one of the last living remnants of the lake system that once defined the Valley of Mexico. Its chinampas are often called floating gardens, but they are not floating. They are raised fields built in shallow wetlands from mud, vegetation, stakes, and accumulated soil, with canals serving as roads between them. Trees such as the ahujote help bind the banks while farmers continually clear waterways, repair edges, move produce, and maintain the ground. The island of the dolls began as one of those working plots. Before cameras and visitors arrived, it contained wet soil, crops, fruit trees, rough shelters, tools, and the ordinary labor required to keep a chinampa alive. Julián did not begin by designing an attraction. He withdrew into a productive landscape where isolation was possible, but survival still depended on daily work. Relatives and neighbors later described him as a farmer who had also worked as a night watchman. By the time journalists recorded him in the 1990s, he had spent decades on the property. His explanations mixed personal memory, religious language, fear, and local belief. They were not always consistent, and that inconsistency matters. The island did not grow from a single written doctrine. It grew from repeated acts performed by one person over a very long time. Tradition holds that a girl drowned near the chinampa. In some versions, Julián found the body. In others, he heard cries but arrived too late. A doll later appeared in the water, and he hung it from a tree because he believed it had belonged to the child. The object has been described as a memorial, an offering, a guardian, and an attempt to calm a troubled presence. What remains clear is that the drowned girl account belongs to oral tradition, not confirmed history. No reliable documentation identifies the child or securely links a drowning to the first doll. Yet an unverified story can still produce real consequences. Whether Julián witnessed an event, inherited a local tale, or gave narrative form to fears he already carried, the doll acquired meaning because he treated it as meaningful. One doll became many. Julián recovered discarded toys from canals and rubbish, accepted them from neighbors, and sometimes exchanged vegetables for them. He did not repair them to look new. Missing arms remained missing. Cracked faces were left exposed. Heads could be tied to branches without bodies. Torsos could be fixed to walls without limbs. Their damage was not a defect to be hidden. It became part of the system he was building. The process was physical and repetitive. Finding, carrying, sorting, tying, placing and leaving. Rope bit into bark. Fishing line tightened around plastic. Faded dresses absorbed humidity. Dolls accumulated above paths, beside doors, under roofs, and along the water. There was no formal exhibition plan. The arrangement emerged from thousands of small decisions made across years. For Julián, the objects appear to have served several purposes at once. He sometimes described them as protection from harmful forces. At other times, he used language that made them sound like guardians or small saints. Later visitors interpreted them as a memorial to the legendary girl. Others saw loneliness, obsession, folk devotion, or outsider art. None of those categories fully explains the place, because the island existed before outsiders tried to classify it. Xochimilco itself completed the transformation. Moisture entered cloth and hollow plastic. Sunlight bleached painted skin. Rain widened cracks. Insects nested inside bodies. Dust and moss settled into eye sockets. Wind moved loose hair and made limbs tap against wood. The island did not need theatrical darkness. Weather supplied the visual language that visitors later mistook for supernatural intention. A doll is designed to resemble a person while remaining harmless and still. Once damaged, that familiar design becomes difficult for the mind to read. A missing eye resembles a stare. A tilted head suggests attention. A hand moved by wind appears purposeful. On this chinampa, hundreds of those signals overlap. The result is not evidence that the dolls are alive. It is evidence of how strongly human perception searches for life in a human-shaped object. By the 1990s, television crews and journalists had begun recording Julián among the dolls. Their cameras preserved the island, but they did not settle its meaning. Some people remembered him as eccentric and gentle. Some accepted his spiritual explanation. Others believed that long isolation had intensified his fears. The more the story circulated, the more the island resisted a single label. Shrine, private ritual, obsession, folk environment, and accidental artwork all seemed partly correct. Julián died in 2001. Later retellings often place his death in the canal near the spot associated with the legendary girl, while other accounts attribute it to heart failure. The precise narrative remains disputed. What can be said safely is that he died on or near the chinampa landscape that had defined his life. Almost immediately, the uncertainty surrounding his death became another layer of the legend. Afterward, relatives continued to care for the property and receive visitors. New dolls arrived as offerings. Boat operators added the site to longer journeys through the canals. The approach became part of the experience. Travelers leave the busier routes, where brightly decorated trajineras carry music and crowds, and enter narrower channels where vegetation closes around the water and the city feels far away. That popularity created a contradiction. The island preserves a real family history and a deeply personal practice, but it also functions within dark tourism. Visitors often arrive expecting proof of whispers, moving eyes, or turning heads. Cameras search for the most damaged face. Each retelling increases the drama because supernatural claims are easier to market than uncertainty. But reducing the island to a haunted attraction misses its historical value. Julián took mass-produced objects that had been discarded and changed their meaning through location, repetition, weather, and belief. On the chinampa, unwanted toys became guardians, witnesses, warnings, and eventually cultural symbols. Their deterioration became part of the environment. even though the person who began the collection may never have called it art. The place also cannot be separated from Xochimilco's wider struggle. The canal and Chinampa system faces pressure from urban expansion, contamination, ecological change, and the abandonment of traditional agriculture. The same water that carries tourists toward the dolls belongs to a vulnerable living landscape. The roots holding the banks, the farmers clearing channels, and the families maintaining small plots are not background details. They are the reason the island can still exist at all. Seen under ordinary daylight, the island becomes less supernatural and more revealing. Birds land near the dolls. Leaves grow around them. Caretakers repair paths. Boats pass beyond the trees. The world continues normally, while hundreds of objects remain in positions chosen by a man who is no longer there. That may be the island's deepest power. Every doll preserves an action. It was found, transported, tied, placed, and left to weather. Together, those actions turned solitude into landscape. The collection exposed Julian's private fears, but it also preserved his memory more effectively than any written account could have done. No clean line can now separate the original experience from the stories added later. The girl may never have existed. The first doll may not have arrived exactly as tradition claims. Julian's motives may have changed across the decades. But the chinampa is real. The ropes are real. The cracked surfaces are real. The years of labor are real. The island of the dolls remains suspended between categories: farm and destination, memorial and artwork, devotion and obsession, evidence and folklore. It does not prove that spirits inhabit the canals of Xochimilco. It reveals something more human, that a story, repeated through physical acts, can reshape a place, and that the place can continue telling the story long after its creator is gone.